Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make an announcement that I just received notice from Chair Sampson that he is unable to attend. We do expect a quorum today, so we will proceed with the meeting once the quorum is reached. But I do, to respect people's time, want to invite anyone who wants to give public comment now. I know DOC and CHS are here and will present once we do reach a quorum. But if anybody wants to give public testimony now, you're welcome to, but we will also keep public testimony on the agenda at the end of the agenda as well. So once a quorum is reached, we will start.
Got a web.
If you're online and would like to testify now, you can go and raise the hand icon in the WebEx, and then we'll know to invite you to testify. So you can go ahead and do that now if you'd like.
What's it like? That's all I do.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for everyone new who has joined us today. I just announced that the chair informed me just now that he is unable to attend. So we do expect a quorum, and once that quorum arrives, we will start with the official meeting. But right now, to respect people's time, we're going to play our pre-recorded people in custody testimony. So we'll proceed with those recordings right now.
the regulation of the Hi, my name is Gene August. That's spelled J-V-A-N, last name A-U-G-U-S-T-E. Full case number 349-2301256. I want to tell you thank you for this opportunity to speak and be heard about my experience in Department of Corrections. However, it's not us, the inmates, that's a problem to this. The officers, because the officers is being told things from their bosses, and their bosses being told from their bosses out of the rules and regulation of the inmate detention handbook. That's not part of regulation, it's what they enforce. They don't enforce the things that's in the rule book of the handbook of the regulation, but they quickly enforce the things that's in the rule book, like assault on staff, assault on inmate. They know all, and they know how to write up an infraction. I mean, because you get two books. One book is orange, and that one is inmate detaining handbook. You got the white book, inmate detaining rule book. See, they know the rule book, but they don't want to follow the handbook. That's where you messed up that right there. That's wrong. You can't do one and not the other. You know what I'm saying? But and then you got different buildings doing different things. Like, I was just moved from AMKC. We get Codecraft and all this stuff, and I got moved to DRBC. Now, I got moved from DRBC by SRT, Strategic Response Team, Strategic Response Team. Then you got the ST, Special Search Team. Then you got ESU, Emergency Service Unit. However, they all do the same thing. They all one. They all the same thing, and no difference between the other. You know what I'm saying? So my property was packed up by SRT, right? Not by me. SRT packed up my property. They take out the soap, the Codecraft, that free soap issued by the Department of Corrections. They take that out. They take the tissue out. Take the sheets and the blankets out. And they take my pillow out. They tell me I'm going to get a whole brand new stuff when I get to my next building, because the building shut down and going to the next building, whatever. Anyway, when I get here, I didn't have none of the stuff they promised me I was going to get. I ain't even going to sit here and make a complaint. They like I'm complaining. But listen, now they telling me I can't get a raise. For me to be in the MO unit and not get a raise, because the fire building doesn't do it, this is a whole new building. This building gives out raises to people at MO. And then for people not to get raises, it's not something that's in the rules and regulations. No.
My name is Xavier Torres. On case number 349-230-1399. I'm at West Facility, Building 11. The guy who brings the food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, his name is Mike. He gave me something that got me sick, made me catch numerous seizures, pass out, and now I have to take pills, medication, to get better from the shit he gave me. I was given a number from the investigators for the Board of Corrections. I've been leaving messages for a month, and nobody's gotten back to me yet. What's going on with y'all helping me with the situation or getting back to me about the situation? Now, so for the guy to avoid me, keep nagging him, Mike, he transferred to a different position. Now I can't even bug him about what he did to me. And also, he took $2,000 from me. And nobody's getting back to me about this. They just gonna let this guy, Mike, get away with what he did. He was the guy who brought us the food, lunch, the breakfast, and stuff. And now he transferred from bringing the food from food service. Now he's a cook. Now I can't even ask him, where's my money? By me asking him, where's my money, all these days and days and days, and contacting y'all and contacting 311. Now he transferred to a different position, so I can't even say that to him no more. Nobody's getting back to me with what he did. Like, I don't care. So why would the investigators come around and give me this number to call if nobody's gonna do nothing about this neither? So I've been making complaints about the Board of Corrections too. 311. I've been making complaints to 311 about him, about the facility, and now Board of Corrections, because I've been calling y'all for a month and y'all don't get back to me. Like, nobody cares. Just let this man get away with what he did. So I'm asking if somebody could get back to me about this. My name is Xavier Torres, 349-230-1399. I'm in West Facility Building 11. Somebody should get back to me so I could tell them exactly.
My name is Angel Rodriguez. I'm calling to complain about our lockout. And since I've been in R&D, so I just came back with ESH, Rosie's. They've been locking me out since I got to RDC every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. For the lockout at 5 in the morning and intentional lockout. They're not giving us a breakfast at 5 in the morning, leaving us to starve till 9, almost sometimes 10, 11. Every day, never, because they don't have a seal on the floor. So because there's no seal on the floor, they're gonna starve us to death. Like, I need y'all to help me, please. I don't want to do something. Like, can y'all please? I need help. I need y'all to rectify that, please. If we don't get no recreation, we don't go outside, we don't get no fresh air. They kept in this. I haven't got wrecked, and I've been in RDC. I've been for 2.5 weeks now. We don't even lock out. Like, they don't change our sheet. Please, if you could help me, please get back to me. Angel Rodriguez, for the case is 241-200-1224. 241-200-1224. Thank you.
The caller has hung up.
Hello, my name is Paul Alexander. My number is 241-20165. I'm an inmate in NIC in Rikers Island Jail. The NIC is North Infirmary Command, and my name is Paul Alexander. I've been in Rikers Island Jail for almost 3 years now, and it's been devastating. Here are a few of the issues that I was hoping you could look into or maybe see. They're supposed to do video visits, and I haven't been able to have a video visit with my sister in a month and a half. You know, that's a pretty long. They used to do it every week or every 2 weeks, and now for the past month and a half, they haven't granted any video visits. My daughter puts in for a video visit every week, but she hasn't been able to get the request through. I don't know why they're not putting it through, and then my sister also puts in for video requests as well. And I'm just trying to get the video visit, please. And that, that means a lot because I don't really get to see them. They're supposed to supply soy milk every morning, and a lot of the mornings they don't have the soy milk because I can't drink milk. I'm lactose intolerant. I don't know why they don't send the soy milk every morning. There's certain sometimes they send it. They haven't put any content on the tablets. They gave us these tablets. But if they could maybe put some games on the tablet that we could buy, or music that we could buy, or movies that we could buy. The tablets are great for making phone calls, but they used to even have a newspaper article, app where we could at least read the titles of the news going on out there, but they took that away. It just seems like they take everything. They also call recreation and law library at the same time. Like today, they called the recreation and law library at the same time, so I missed the law library. You know, I went to the recreation, and then a lot of days I go to the law library and I miss recreation. And then this past Saturday, they had no recreation at all. And then two Sundays ago, they had no recreation at all. And also for the past 3 out of the past 4 Sundays, they've had no church services because they won't give the minister a guard who could bring the inmates to church services. You know, all they would have to do is have a captain or a guard bring the inmates from the 6th floor to the 5th floor and the inmates from the 4th floor to the 5th floor. You know, not a big deal. It takes you less than 5 minutes, but they won't even give the minister. You can look into these issues or see if something can be done about it. The soy milk, the content, adding content to the tablets, the video visits, if one can be granted, you know, because I haven't had one in so long.
Thank you, everyone, for the additional people who have shown up. As I stated at the beginning, at 1 o'clock, we heard shortly before the beginning of the meeting that the chair is unable to attend today. So we're waiting for a quorum so we could start our official meeting. I'm gonna ask the board members if you're okay with, DOC has a presentation on EMTC. You wouldn't be able to ask any questions until we have a quorum, but if they can present, because I believe they have a time schedule that presenter needs to leave. You, okay, so we'll hear from DC Ben, I believe it is.
We can ask
They
questions.
will ask questions. They just won't vote on anything.
We just can't vote on anything without a quorum, but we can hear and ask questions.
Okay, so I'll ask you to begin then.
Hello? Can you hear me? No? It's on? Hello? Can you hear me there? Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Kat Thompson. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Department of Correction. With me today, I have a lot of colleagues actually, so I'll just take a moment to introduce you to them. We've got Rob Gonzalez. He's our Deputy Commissioner for Training. We've got Ron Edwards. He's our Deputy Commissioner for Administration. We've got Deputy Commissioner Ben for Facilities and Fleet. We've got Allie Robertson, as you know, InterGov. Deputy Commissioner Chris Miller for Facility Operations. We've got Deputy Commissioner James Saunders for Health Affairs. And we've got head of our Assistant Commissioner Matt Pasquarelli for Budget with us as well here today. So we're here to answer your many questions and look forward to it. Thank you.
Can I start? Thank you. And I wanted to start by asking for some additional information on an issue that I asked about last month, and we received a little bit of follow-up, but I'd like a bit more detail, which is about the visit floor at EMTC. As I understand, it has been under construction for quite some time. My understanding from board staff is that a significant amount of the work has been completed. I'd like to understand what is still outstanding and what is the timeline for completing that outstanding work.
Hello, everyone. DC Ben. All of the work has been completed at the visits floor in the EMTC.
That's great news. So
Visits have started.
what is the timeline for using the visit floor and resuming visits on
have
site?
started. Visits have started as of yesterday.
So visits at EMTC are now open.
Correct.
That's very, very good news. Thank you.
Bro.
Can I just in follow up, does that mean that the West facility visit space has now, it's now being entirely used for people at West facility? Is that right? I know that they were sharing that
Yes.
space.
Yes.
Okay. And so there had been the West facility visit opportunity or time had been constrained a little bit, but now it's full-time or whatever it was before.
Correct.
That's right? Okay.
Correct.
Could you just let us know what the capacity of the EMTC visit floor is and what the visiting hours are?
So the capacity is 15 at a time, but the hours, I'm not sure if Chris. 15. 1-5. Right? I don't know the hours. I don't know the hours. That's operations question.
Yeah, everything at EMTC is consistent. Good afternoon. Consistent with the rest of visiting hours. Wednesday and Thursday are our late days. Saturday, Sunday are our early days. So I think registration Wednesday, Thursday starts at 2 and goes through the evening. Visits run through the evening until all visitors have been processed. And then Saturday, Sunday, it's on our website. Don't quote me. I think it starts early, like 8 in the morning registration, and runs until folks have been processed through visits. And then Fridays is televisits.
Can you remind us how many folks are residing in the MTSC now?
Yes.
Census?
As of today, 1,208.
Well, on that. And only 15 folks can go to visits?
That's no, that's at a time, and like
At a
this is
time.
rolling throughout the day. So in a given day, you're gonna have certainly more than 15. And every visit, of course, is an hour. So we move them on a rolling basis.
On that capacity, can I just for comparison, is that 15 per hour per session consistent with, let's say, RNDC's capacity?
You know, I don't have all the other capacities in front of me. But you know, we started EMTC visits this week, so we're gonna run it, see how it goes. And if we find that we can expand and create more capacity, we'll certainly consider that. But I still don't have the other floors in front of me at this point.
On visits still, since you closed AMKC and you brought most of those people, I believe, to OBCC, some to GRVC, are visits available for, as scheduled for OBCC?
Yes, yes,
Is recreation scheduled?
yes.
I think you've told us that you need to have, you can't do are people have access to recreation every day? Maybe I should phrase the question better.
Yes, they do.
Oh, our staff has been told that until you complete a couple of new yards, that you're not able to bring everybody who wants to go to recreation each day to recreation.
So, sure, do similar control. Yeah. Are we, I mean,
Okay,
is it still within the
sorry about that.
OBCC construction, or do you want to move to the OBCC portion of the agenda?
Okay.
Before you do that, I have been updating everyone who's in the audience that we were waiting for a quorum before we officially start the meeting. We now have a quorum. So I'm going to ask that we pause and officially begin our meeting, and then we'll resume with DOC questioning.
Thank you, Jasmine. First, I'd like to apologize for my tardiness, but also that our chair did not let us know until 12:27 that he wouldn't be here to have the quorum. So we will, now that we do have a quorum and the members are present this afternoon, and the NYC Board of Corrections September 8th, 2023 meeting is now in session. Okay. So the first order of business, we will continue with DOC. Now that the meeting is officially started.
Sorry, can I add?
To add to the agenda. So the first order of business is to vote on the agenda, and then you can add an item. Will a board member move to vote to approve the September 8th, 2023 meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any edits or comments?
Yes, I'd like to add to the agenda an item around psychiatric hospitalization for women and the lack of bed space to do so.
Any additional edits? All in favor of approving?
Yeah.
No. Our second order of business is a vote on the draft minutes from the June 13th, 2023 board meeting and executive session, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the June 13th, 2023 meeting minutes and executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll now turn it over to Jasmine.
Okay, so I will have DOC resume with the questioning session. DOC's update. You had mentioned to me that you had a time constraint, so I said that you could go now. Is that changed? Okay, so we can continue. I believe you were doing the EMTC construction question.
Does anybody have additional questions on EMTC construction?
I think we had. Did we hear about the status of the north yard? I believe there was some construction there. Is that completed as well?
North Yard repairs were made in-house to the best of our abilities, and now we're waiting on the final paver contract, which is out for O&B approval. So our vendor is secured, the contract is secured, now it's sent to O&B for final approval. And once that's completed, it'll be paved, and then business recess can resume in the North Yard. Or recreation, whatever you call it.
So the timeline depends upon OMB's approval and then
Yes.
registration
Yeah.
of a new contract with
No,
a new vendor?
We have a pre-existing vendor selected. The vendor was selected, everything that happened, now it's at O&B for final approval and sign off. It's like every city contract, we have to get approvals.
Following on AMTC, can you give us an update on the law library? It's okay.
It's an operation.
Yes. Operations.
So actually, update on the law library is that our director of law libraries met with the warden or the assistant commissioner of the facility. And we actually just developed a schedule that will allow for in-person visits starting very shortly. Actually, Tuesday will begin. So we have a schedule for every housing area to be brought down to the law library. I actually have a call with BOC staff, I believe Monday, to talk about this exact issue. So we'll have updates for them as well at that time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one other EMTC question. I believe that you're supposed to scan all coming inmates at EMTC. We reviewed the logs, and there are only 301 people who were scanned according to the log in the EMTC, and 1,731 people were admitted. Are you aware that scanning is not happening regularly?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not prepared to address that topic at this moment. I can get back to you offline with more information on.
I mean, I've been there several times. One scanners have not been all working. You're not aware of that issue?
I'm not personally, but I can circle back.
Well, I raise it because it's a very important issue for you and everybody in terms of security. And we're going to talk about other security issues, but if you're not scanning at that point, I know you want to, but I don't believe, if you can refute those, tell me that those numbers are not right. You got them 1,731 admitted to the facility and only 301 scans. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do any more board members have any questions relating to the EMTC construction? Okay, so Now we'll move to the update on the opening of OBCC, if DOC can answer those questions.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Chris Miller, Deputy Commissioner for Operations, Custody Management, and Classification. I've been designated by Commissioner Molina to testify today on two items. One is OBCC update, and the second is violence and RESH level 1 units. I'll start with OBCC. The opening of OBCC was a 5-step project. It started with the opening of RESH at Rosie's, and then we moved to populating the annex at EMTC with low-level detainees and sentenced individuals, backfill the SH units at GRBC with CAPS, PACE, MO units, and reopened OBCC, and finally the closing of AMKC. This 5-step plan involved the rehousing of approximately 2,650 PICs and resulted in a net gain island-wide of 403 secure cells and 45 dorm beds for a gain total capacity on the island of 448. Prior to the closing of AMKC, we housed 83 PACE individuals in AMKC and 393 PICs. We moved many of those mental health inmates to GRBC. We opened 17A, 17B, 11B, plus 1 unit in RNDC Mod 3 Upper North. AMKC's CAPS unit transitioned to GRBC Unit 11A. These units are in addition to previously operating PACE housing units in 8A, 8B, 19A, and 19B in GRBC. GRBC also accommodated MO beds in units 13A, 13B, 15A, and 15B. In OBCC, we populated 5 MO housing units, 1 and 2 lower, 1 and 2 upper, and 3 upper. This is a net gain of 65 PACE beds for the island and 87 MO beds. Currently working with CHS staff to coordinate 10A and 10B in GRBC to open step units, step down for mental health inmates, or step up basically in between, trying to evaluate their mental health status, and that'll give us an additional 90 beds for mental health capacity. In addition to moving to 2,600 plus minus inmates, C71 mental health unit was moved to GRC Building 12 Main. ENTC opened a new medical clinic 24/7 a day and a 16-hour per day mental health clinic. EMTC reopened their visiting, as DC Ben just spoke on, and visiting. They no longer visit at West Facility. I'm going to add that we are constructing a new visiting room in the West Facility that will be better to accommodate the West Facility and inmates that are incarcerated individuals that will be moving into the West dorms from BCBC. We've also done extensive fencing in the EMTC main yard, as DC Ben mentioned, OBCC main yard, OBCC tower, and annex yards with the goal of extending outside recreation opportunities. Basically, we took the big yards, we split them in 2 so that we can put more groups outside and we can accommodate more outside recreation. That's just a little background on OBCC. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have some questions. Where is the new clinic that you built on BB?
We did
OBCC?
EMTC. We did not build it. It was there. We just we found a staff to open it, work with CHS, and they staffed the unit 24/7, and we staffed it with security staff as well. The goal of that area is to accommodate the 600 inmates that went to the EMTC annex and not pull medical staff out of the new intake process.
Well, that's great. Well, that's CHS also, but the step up, step down units, we've never heard of those before. Is that what is that?
So
And
that's
what,
just
what, what kind of staffing is it going to have? What kind of physical spaces are going to have?
I'm going to let them answer most of that, but it's our collaborative effort for them to evaluate inmates who need increased mental health care. It'll allow us not to have traffic jams of individuals in 12 Main, which replaced C-71. And we developed a policy also working together where we can bypass 12 Main or MO evaluations with a TNF going directly to those units so that individuals aren't waiting for a second evaluation by a psychologist prior to being admitted to a unit. And that's where we get a lot of people stuck waiting for those evaluations, and we can put them into those steps.
I understand that that's been a problem. So you're going to create a unit where people need mental health evaluation in terms of going to an MO or CAPS, but it's going to be a step up unit with a
Step up or step down. It's a unit where an individual could be decapacitating in a regular GP housing unit. They would go to this step unit. That would be one possibility. They'd be reevaluated possibly to go to MO unit, PACE, or CAPS.
In the end, will you have more or less mental health beds in
In the
OBCC?
end, we've already
with the
increased
step up? Yeah.
capacity significantly with the transition out of AMKC to OBCC and other facilities. And this will add an additional 90 beds to that capacity.
Well, that's great. We'll see.
Can I ask a clarification about the MO space? Do you have a sense of what the conversion has been in terms of cells to cells versus cells to dorms?
Well, we opened 300 dorm beds in OBCC and then 180 cell units in GRBC. And
180 cell beds, sorry, is that what you said? Thank you. And is that fewer cells than were available before, do you know?
is that fewer cells?
Fewer cells than were in AMKC?
No, we've actually, yeah, I'd have to get back
Okay.
on that exact answer.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful to know. Generally, my question, this move has obviously been an unbelievable logistical feat. And these buildings are now much more crowded than they were before. What do you see as the operational challenges that you're still working through at OBCC and at GRBC right now?
Well, I disagree with they're much more crowded. As I stated, we created over 400 new beds on the island with the moves. When we vacated GRBC and moved Resch over to Rosie's, we gained 7 units there. When we opened the annex in EMTC, we gained 600 beds there. So crowding is not an issue. As a matter of fact, it's opposite.
Okay, are there outstanding operational challenges related to the consolidation into these buildings?
It's Rikers Island.
I'm aware. So can you enumerate what the operational challenges are that are outstanding related to the moves to these buildings?
The moves are complete. We're going through the transition phase. With anybody with correctional experience will understand that transitions take a little time to play themselves out. But I think operationally, we have an outstanding plan at OBCC to provide minimum standards, as well as GRBC and EMTC. As I said, we opened an additional clinic there. We're constructing a new yard at EMTC, waiting on the paving piece. We constructed 3 new yards at OBCC, which are operational. And I think it gave us an opportunity to develop better operational plans than we had at AMKC and as we had the facilities laid out previously.
Okay, thank you.
Can I'm going to jump in and just make sure that I fully understand. I think I've understood you to say a couple of times that you opened a new clinic at EMTC. Is that
Correct.
That's correct. So what is the clinic capacity currently at OBCC? And are there any plans to change that?
No, I don't know the exact capacity at OBCC's clinic, but we've been working with CHS. We planned extensively that was one of the operational issues that we looked to improve from AMKC, and we moved into OBCC with an operational plan for clinic production, distribution of medication. And we have experienced some issues, but I believe that our plan's in place and we needed to move a little further with the operations to get it where it needs to be.
Okay, are there any other
So
questions about operation?
Yeah. So I was at OBCC last week, and I was at two housing units, not general population housing units, and universally, person said to me that they were not being called for sick call. Are you aware of any problem with access to sick call? If you put it, what's the expectation that someone would be seen in sick call? How long would it take?
The expectation is that they would be seen. It
Seen
depends
within
on the
the-
number of individuals that are signed up for sick call and the staffing levels for the day, but the expectation is that every individual that requests sick call would be seen.
And you believe that to be the case?
I just said it.
That everyone who signs up that day will be seen that day for sick call?
Now I'll say it twice.
Okay.
Well, I think you said that that was the expectation. Is that occurring? How is it being tracked?
I cannot give you exact information how it's being tracked other than individuals sign up and then we would take that sheet and the individuals would be produced in the clinic for sick call. It's not really fair that you present that type of question to us at this time. If you have an individual that you believe wasn't seen, I'd be happy to investigate why that individual wasn't seen and verify that that information is actually correct.
With all due respect, we're asking about my question was about your systems for tracking access to sick call. It is not about a specific grievance, but I guess I could back up and ask, does the department have a system for tracking?
Yes, it does. And I'm not prepared to tell you how that system exactly works. I do not know at this time.
Okay, well, I would like for us to follow up. If there's anyone, I know there's a lot of DOC staff here. Is there anyone who can speak to what the process is, what the system is for tracking access to sick call?
We will get back to you with answers to that question. Okay.
Thank you for that. I want us to move on to the suggested questions around slashings and stabbings in RESH level 1, but I also want to make note on the record to follow up around the tracking system of how individuals who put in for sick call and how they are tracked that they are actually having sick call. So I want to move on. And after this section, we'll hear from the public advocate who's ready to speak. So
Okay. I'd like to give you a little background on RESH if I can. So RESH was populated on June 27 of this year. RESH has a total of 7 housing units, including 5 level 1 units with a capacity of 160 and 2 level 2 units with a capacity of 72. The total capacity in RESH is 232 cells. RESH operates a medical clinic, intake, visiting area, general office, all separate from Rosie's operations. We've had 3 incidents involving PICs manipulating their cell locking systems in RESH level 1 units. The last incident occurred on August 17th. We've taken the following steps to prevent PICs from obstructing their cell locking mechanisms. The first is FMRD welded flat metal stock over the cell door interior bolt, preventing tampering. We retrained RESH staff to ensure that the cell door locking mechanisms are clear of obstructions when securing cell doors, and to push-pull on cell doors to ensure cell doors are secure. We increase supervision by frontline supervisors to ensure officers are clearing cell door locking mechanisms, pushing, pulling on cell doors to ensure cell doors are in fact secure. Since populating RESH level 1 units 10 weeks ago, we have had 6 slashing stabbing incidents. We've taken the following steps to eliminate PIC violence by participating in programming and restraint tests in level 1 to include: we shorten the chain on the leg restraints, limiting PIC movement while secured to the table, installation of restraint desk back panels similar to the side panels. 2 units have been completed, and we anticipate that all 5 level 1 units will be completed by the end of the month. We've increased supervision by assigned captains of officers conducting the three-point search prior to putting the inmates in the restraint tables for programming. Any
Okay.
questions on Resh?
Yes, you're saying now that now you think that you have a way of keeping the cell doors locked and you didn't have that before?
We've always had the capability to keep the cell doors locked. The cell doors are 100% operational and secure. Due to staff complacency and not doing their job at 100%, individuals were tampering with that by stuffing the door locking mechanism and not checking the door to be secure. In addition, we welded a flat piece of metal over the bolt on the inside of the cell, so that would help increase our ability to detect tampering.
That's going to be outside or inside? Inside.
Yes.
I don't understand how the shortening of the chain is going to
Well,
decrease the stabbing when someone comes outside, and it will limit motion.
It decreases their mobility while restrained in the desk.
Oh, I'm sure will decrease their mobility. So the situation, there's just, as I understand it right now, is if you want to sit in a restraint desk, you have a risk of 6 times in the past 7 months of being slashed by someone, and if you're afraid of that, you can't leave your cell because the only thing you can do is to go to a restraint desk if you're in ESA or RCHH. Is that those are the 2 options? You stay in your cell, or you're in a restraint desk.
Under your circumstances, yes.
So have there been any actions taken because of the 6 slashing stabbings?
Well, I did just review those, but I'll go over them again for you.
No, in terms of staff. You said it's a staffing. You said the locking is fine, but the staff failed to secure them.
Yes. So as I stated previously, increased training of staff on how to secure a cell door to ensure that the locking mechanism is not obstructed. And then when they shut the door, to push-pull on the door to ensure the door is secure.
That's different than you had in last year.
That is different.
Is that a different system that you had for assuring locking a year ago?
No, that's a fundamental correctional practice that we were complacent in achieving.
So why do you think that's not working?
Well, I believe it is working. We haven't had an individual come out of the cell since the 17th of August. And as I stated, we continue to train staff and put additional supervision in those units and emphasize the importance of securing the cell doors. And I believe that is what is going to be successful for us.
Well, this is not a question, but the board's RMSA restrictive housing standards said you can't do restraint desks, and we were concerned about danger to people in the restraint desks, and we continue to be concerned. And you should stop it because it's dangerous. Making the chain shorter just makes people a lot more likely to fall over or something. Anyway, thank you.
Well, I respectfully disagree, but thank you for your statement.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up question, and
Yes,
it continues to baffle me. I understand the slashings that are happening in the restraint desk. I guess I'm struggling with, as individuals are moved from their cell to the restraint desk, what is the protocol to search and make sure that those weapons are not on the person so that they can slash another person?
Yep, that's an absolutely fair question. And as I stated, that we increase the supervision of the captains in the three-point search area. So an individual is cuffed behind their back, they are escorted to the three-point frisk area. In the three-point frisk area, the cuffs are removed, they're strip searched, they go through a metal detector, their clothes are searched. Again, staff complacency is an issue. We are working on that. We are working on the training. We are working on increased supervision of that process to ensure that individuals are placed in the chairs without weapons in their possession.
I'd just like to
Follow up with that. That's corrections 101 for
I agree.
any staff that's working inside a Department of Corrections, right?
I agree 100%.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I do, before DLC leaves, if there's any board members who have questions or around your added agenda item.
Yeah. Yeah, so the added agenda item, I think a conversation to be had with both agencies about the lack of an issue that apparently has been going on for months, which is that women who are in need of acute psychiatric hospitalization, that there is no bed space available to them in the hospital system at all. I wonder if the best thing to do is to hear briefly from CHS first on this, and then I would like to hear from DOC about it as well, because it's a hospital issue first.
Hi, good afternoon. Bipin Subedi, CMO for CHS. Just to step back for a moment and to be clear that any female who has an acute psychiatric need is referred to the Elmhurst CPEP and is evaluated. So we do have procedures and processes in place to, again, ensure that someone who has an acute psychiatric need is evaluated. And then the Elmhurst CPEP evaluates the individuals and then provides treatment and then does not discharge the patient back to us until they feel that they are safe to return. But we do not have the dedicated female inpatient psychiatric unit, D11, that was open before. We have been discussing this with the DOC. This is an important item for both organizations. Speaking for CHS or H&H, my understanding is that the unit is certified to accept patients. And that H&H does have the staffing to support the unit. And I believe DOC has been looking into the staffing on their end, but I'll defer to them to speak to that.
Sorry, Dr. Subedi said that unit is reopening D11 at Elmhurst, is that right?
Correct.
And I understand that you're saying that the ER at Elmhurst is not sending people back until they've deemed them stable, but there are obviously many cases of people who don't stabilize in a 48-hour period or something like that. And can you just sort of speak to whether you think we are currently able to provide the level of acute hospitalization to women who are very seriously ill that we need to be?
Yeah, well, I think I can say it's not a substitute for an inpatient unit. And, the way that things are working now, we're managing the acute needs. We are collaborating closely with Elmhurst on the sends and the returns, but it isn't replacement for an inpatient unit.
Right, like if you have a woman who needs treatment over objection, you don't have a place to put that person.
Technically, the CPEP may be able to do that, but again, it's not the same infrastructure as an inpatient
For
unit.
a day, but not.
Correct.
But not in a way that stabilizes them in a long term on a medication that they could come back on or whatever it is.
Correct. There's not an infrastructure for a longer term placement in a hospital.
And just to be totally clear and summarize what I'm hearing from you, H&H is prepared to open a unit that would be dedicated for these women. And without that, there's no capacity to outpost them elsewhere. Bellevue can't take them, et cetera.
Unfortunately, I can't speak for all of health and hospitals, but but what you said about the inpatient unit at Elmhurst is correct.
Okay, does anyone else have questions for CHS on this matter?
Yeah, I think just to be completely clear, so D11 is ready for patients if needed.
On the clinical side.
On the clinical side, okay, thank you.
I guess I have one more question, which is how many patients on average, I know you don't have the numbers in front of you, but are we talking 2 women a month? Are we talking 10 women a month? What are we talking about?
I could say maybe at any given time, it ranges from 0 to low single digits in the Elmhurst CPEP. It obviously fluctuates, but that's just a general.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Otherwise, we can go into DOC. Ali from DOC can answer anything about this. Hi.
Hi.
How are you? Can you just speak to the situation with staffing for women who need psychiatric hospitalization?
I visited the Elmhurst area. I met with several individuals representing from Elmhurst. We went over first, it was not prepared to accept female people in custody. There were still some security issues that had to be addressed. They were working on it. We did discuss a staffing plan. We are prepared to accommodate that staffing plan as well.
That's fantastic. Do you have a sense of timeline?
Right now, we're still working with the construction over at Elmhurst because there are very serious security concerns.
Okay.
It's not only for the individuals that need that treatment, it's also for the individual that are going to that facility as well.
Right, it's infrastructure stuff on the floor.
Correct.
And H&H is responsible for those upgrades, not DOC. I see, okay. So maybe we can follow up. If we can follow up with, we'll follow up with you all, but we could also follow up with H&H to get a sense of timeline on when that unit will be open. That would be great.
And the new unit can accommodate 13 individuals that need that treatment as well.
Okay, that's great to hear. So
And they're ready to go as well. They also had some staffing strains because of what's happened in the industry itself. A lot of people left the medical industry to go on to private. So they've been having problems, but we've been working collaboratively to have a good date.
So your impression is just waiting on the infrastructure pieces and then but all agencies are ready to staff?
Yes.
Okay, that's really great. That's different than what I understood. So we'll look for updates from that and we can follow up next meeting. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good afternoon, too.
I just,
Just
I believe that as you described it, was 101, for the past 6 years in ESH, approximately, you've had a policy when someone leaves the area, they get strip searched and they're double chained and someone goes with them. And when they return, they get strip searched and they don't have contact visits. Where do you think the weapons are coming from?
So could you repeat that, please?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Given that people in our ESH and GRBC ESH didn't have any contact visits, and given that for many years, the policy for ESH has been, as you described, searching people, strip searching people when they enter and leave the unit. My question is, where do you think the weapons are coming from? The things that people use to slash other people?
So weapons can come from anywhere. Individuals in custody have a lot of time to figure out how to create a weapon. I've seen inmates cut another inmate's jugular vein with a toenail. I've seen stabbing with a pen. Weapons can be made. Individuals are clever in doing so. And I can't tell you where all those weapons come from. In addition, ceramic weapons are very popular, as are wood, that aren't picked up in metal detecting systems. And, you know, we have to get better at detecting them, which I've already conceded to. However, you know, individuals in custody are clever in developing weapons and utilizing them.
Just you know this, but there are many people who enter and leave the facility each day without being scanned or searched at all. Your staff.
No, that is not correct.
Are they scanned?
Are they scanned? We only have body scanners in 2 facilities. So
Are
those
they-
2 facilities are random body scanners.
There's
But
one-
every
one
individual
facility,
that doesn't go through the body scanner goes through the metal detection system, and their property goes through a line scan system.
Right.
Which I can tell you from 38 years in New York State Department of Corrections doesn't occur in any facility. So we have good systems in place. We are doing our best to detect contraband coming into these facilities, and we have good processes in place as well.
Thank you.
I want to follow up with that, and the public advocate is asking if DOC could stay for his comments. But when you talk about scanners and making sure contraband doesn't come into the facility, working in corrections across the country, individuals who enter a facility should go through a scanner, including staff. So I'm asking in DOC on Rikers, is staff going through a scanner as well to ensure any contraband is not being brought in?
So, ma'am, currently we have scanners in 2 facilities. We randomly scan staff because of time restraints in those scanners. We have plans developed. EMTC will be the next facility that will have a body scanner installed, and we plan to install scanners in every facility as we move forward.
Just a follow-up on that. That's Correctional 101.
I don't know, ma'am. You seem to keep telling me that, but I think I know Corrections 101 quite well.
Staff typically to ensure contraband is not being brought in. Visitors and staff in any corrections operating in this country are scheme to ensure that not even staff is being.
Well, I can answer that, man, because I worked in every correctional facility in New York State docks, and not one individual is scanned going into any of those facilities. That's over 30,000 employees on a daily basis. So unfortunately, you are not correct.
Or maybe we need to expand your horizon beyond New York State.
Maybe I do, but I'm on Rikers now, and I gave you that information.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
going to go to the public advocate, and I'm asking DOC to stay. I want to get to the public advocate, and he's asking DOC to stay.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you so much. Peace and blessing, love and light to everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jamani Williams. I'm the public advocate for the city of New York. Thank you, Chair Sampson, and the rest of the board for allowing me to speak this afternoon and share my concerns regarding the conditions in our city jails and recent changes to services and special mental health units, personnel changes, infrastructure changes, as well as ongoing concerns around missed medical appointments, court dates, and irreversible harms stemming from the uses of solitary confinement. I also want to thank the DOC for staying and listening. I also want to highlight oversight issues regarding this board's vital access to video footage and transparency regarding reporting on deaths in custody. I'd like to propose some solutions that can transform the current culture of neglect and violence into a future built on health and safety for everyone detained and working on Rikers Island. This year, the department has taken multiple actions, in my opinion, to block transparency and undermine accountability by limiting the Board of Corrections' remote access to video footage from the jails, implementing a policy of no longer alerting the media to deaths in their custody unless I'm told media requests it, and the continued issuance of emergency executive orders to suspend aspects of the Board of Corrections minimum standards, including limits on solitary confinement. Proper oversight of jails in our city requires swift and transparent communication with the Board of Corrections and should not deviate from that standard. Since the last BOC meeting on June 13th, 5 people have died in DOC custody. The circumstances surrounding these deaths and the manner in which they were reported are at times troubling. Most puzzling was the death of Curtis Davis on July 23rd, who was reportedly found on the floor of his cell experiencing heart failure. An autopsy performed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner later found Curtis Davis died from suicide by hanging. The absence of this information from DOC's internal report and the disparity in the cause of death reflect a rooted dysfunction in departmental culture that slides into the shadows wherever deeper transparency is needed. In August, there were 45 reported incidents of detainee slashings and stabbings. This is an 82% increase from the previous month of July, and the highest reported total per month since October of 2022. So while violence is decreasing in our streets, somehow it is increasing inside our jails. There are also 46 assaults on staff members reported in the month of August. This does demonstrate that no one is safe on either side of the bars. I do note that number of assaults on staff is down 10% from the previous month of July, which I'm happy to see. And while both officers and detainees remain vulnerable to violence, it appears that safety for detainees who have not been convicted of a crime is becoming increasingly difficult for correctional staff to ensure. Sadly, increased violence is not the only indicator of continued dysfunction. It also reflected in the disproportionate amount of individuals not produced for medical appointments. This is especially true for young people currently housed at RNDC, where in CHS's last quarterly report, it was found that nearly 50% of the time youth housed there failed to be produced for mental health appointments. Missing medical appointments can lead to deaths. Deshaun Carter, who died in May of 2022, had missed 92 medical appointments during his 3 experiences in jail dating back to 2018. Having access to minimum standards like medical care is not a luxury. It's a basic human right for people being detained on Rikers Island. At a time when 53% of the jail population have a diagnosed mental illness, we must do our best to support those who need access to care. Of course, it would be best if they weren't on Rikers to begin with, but they are. In addition to that access, we must work to limit the experiences of the trauma that people are experiencing while being detained by creating environments that foster safety rather than exacerbate mental distress. This means refraining from weaponizing emergency lockdowns against detained individuals in custody. This means eliminating the unnecessary use of restraints on individuals who pose no threats to themselves and others. This means expanding the use of programs like CAPS and PACE and ensuring that the current transition of these programs to alternate facilities will not impact the stability and safety created in these specialized units. These programs serve as successful evidence-based alternatives to the use of solitary confinement, which is an inhumane practice that I hope to end through the passage of Intro 549, which will eliminate all uses of solitary confinement in city jails and ensure due process rights for those in restrictive housing. I'm also troubled by how the department is meeting the needs of those who are receiving the $17 million worth of programming that was recently cut. I have concerns that those needs previously being addressed simply can't be now, and I'm curious to hear data about how they are presently going. To date, roughly 2,500 detainees have waited for their cases to be adjudicated for longer than 6 months. 1,266 people have waited over a year. Given all I've mentioned regarding the lack of transparency, increased violence, decreased access to services, and deteriorating infrastructure, it is clear that rapid decarceration is the only way to improve the current conditions on Rikers Island, as well as increasing speedy trial, which I'm sure that's a place where we all agree. Even with the planned closure of Vernon C. B Center, BKA the Boat, also known as the Boat, I fear this can lead to overcrowding and degradation of services, much like those that led to the deaths of Stephen Cadu and Gregory Acevedo. So today I call on the Department of Correction to work cooperatively with this board, who possess the knowledge and experience to develop a concrete plan to decrease the jail population that would engage district attorneys, judges, and service providers in a serious analysis of the unnecessary detention currently occurring in our city jails. In the meantime, we must work to actively improve conditions on Rikers Island so that we can have justice, health, and safety on both sides of the bar. I don't propose that this is easy. I know this is a difficult job in a difficult space, but what we're doing currently isn't working. I know in some places there have been improvements, not enough. People are still dying. People are still being harmed. And so we have to move quicker and hopefully have more willingness from DOC to collaborate from those of us who have different points of view, because clearly what we're doing is not preventing the deaths and not preventing the violence on both sides of those bars. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Public Advocate. Before we move on to CHS, I would like to say that I think it's only fair. We've put DOC in a silo, right? Without understanding that there can be leadership that actually states policies and procedures should be in place. There's actually implementation of those policies and procedures to ensure that people are actually safe while they're in custody on Rikers Island. So I think it's only fair that we start allowing, outside of leadership, an agenda item where correctional staff and captains get to come in and speak for themselves as well. So I'm making a motion that on the agenda moving forward, that correctional officers and staff get to actually speak on their own behalf to answer questions and actually report. Not just public comment, an agenda item, just as DOC leadership updates. I think correctional officers need to be able to update and answer questions as well around implementation.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you.
Assistant Chair, before DOC leaves, I would love to afford you the opportunity to talk about one of Molina's priorities, which is education. How's it going? First week of school.
I wish Ms. Torres was here, but she's not here today. As you know, she would love to talk about it. I'm happy to provide you an update from Ms. Torres.
Okay.
As soon as
is it going well?
Early next week. I'm not, frankly,
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not plugged in myself, but I'll get you something from Ms. Torres.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move to CHS updates.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Castellanos. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Correctional Health Services. With me, I have Dr. Bipin Subedi, who is our Chief Medical Officer, Nancy Arias, who is a Chief Nursing Officer. So we don't have a presentation, but we're here to answer questions. But in regards to the move of the mental health population at AMKC to GRVC and OBCC, I could tell you that before DOC completed all the moves, we worked closely with them to ensure that there was a safe transition from the clinical standpoint. We ensured that the new mental health units at OBCC had the appropriate infrastructure so that clinicians could engage with patients on the unit. And we also worked with our human resources department to ensure that we were able to reassign clinicians from MKC to follow their own patients to OBCC and GRBC to ensure some, minimize disruption in services. So that is just the upshot on how we work with DOC to ensure that this transition happen as safely and smooth as possible. But happy to answer any other questions regarding that.
Go ahead.
I'd like you or anybody to talk about this step up, step down unit. I just want to make one. I'm going to ask a question. As you say it, I've always thought, and I'm not a psychiatrist, that the best thing to do in terms of the mental health program on Rikers Island would be to make it all like CAPS, rather than to create less staffed units, less staffed by corrections, less staffed by your staff. And you and I and anybody here who works on Rikers Island has seen the MO units, which are very sad. They're a bunch of people walking around, not getting much in terms of programming, and they're psychotic, and they're heavily medicated, and there's not stuff for them to do, and it's dangerous situations. Several of them have died in the past year. So I just, and when you talk about the step up and step down, tell me why it shouldn't be all stepped up.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, I just want to reiterate what DC Miller said about having a significant number of additional PACE beds coming online from before. So we think that's very important. And so a lot of the individuals you're referring to, will hopefully be moved to a higher level of care we can provide that we know is useful. In terms of STEP, I just want to clarify a few things. And I appreciate the department's willingness to engage with us on new treatment models. We are right now first letting the dust settle with all the other changes that have been occurring, and are proposing a new type of unit. So I'll talk about that. So nothing is finalized. I'm happy to, discuss, the units in more detail once we settle on a lot of things. But I think just stepping back, what we noticed during the pandemic, and since the jail has been going through some operational challenges, is that there's a higher number of SMI no individuals who are housed on the MO unit that were traditionally more concentrated with SMI yes. And the SMI no individuals have different treatment needs than SMI yes individuals. And also we found that there was a cohort that tended to go back and forth between MO and GP. And so the goal, as we're thinking ahead, is not just about bed space, but differentiating and expanding kind of the suite of services and type of mental health treatment and units that we offer. Because the needs, again, just speaking on a population-based level, for someone who's SMI no may be different than SMI yes, and there may be some issues in terms of vulnerability too. So I think the goal is to, again, expand the spectrum of therapeutic housing areas to include units that would be specifically for SMI no individuals who tend to go back and forth between MO and GP. We had somewhat of a siloed approach to therapeutic housing. There's GP, there's MO, and there's PACE. And so again, we want to create more of a spectrum. So that's just to explain a little bit more, provide more context. It's not just necessarily stepping up and down. It's about meeting the needs of a different clinical cohort. Sure, no problem.
And I'm neglected to say that an additional solution, but perhaps a better solution, is to decrease the number of SMI on Rikers Island, to decrease the population. I know that you agree, but I want to say that.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that you're talking about kind of breaking silos and coordinated and any way of thinking about work and support. How are you doing in terms of coordinating services with the program folks? I mean, we have heard about a significant amount of investment in groups, in mentorship, in the use of the elective behavioral therapy by the counseling staff. And there have been moments where I've actually met young people that may have a social worker or even a psychologist is there in the DOE school, and may also be connected to one of your psychiatrists and clinicians, and may also be part of one of the programs. Are you working around creating a more holistic approach?
Yeah, so I think just to be clear, when you say programming, you're talking about treatment, like
No,
CHS
no,
delivered.
I'm talking about the Department of Corrections treatment. I mean, programming.
Correct. Okay,
But actually, many of it, I mean, most of it that we have heard and seen is kind of based on cognitive behavioral work or the elective behavioral therapy. And how is that aligning with your clinical work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we've actually made a lot of efforts recently to have regular meetings with DOC program staff to better integrate. I'll just say the programming needs of individuals are there regardless if they're in GP, MO, or in PACE. And so what we've done in these discussions is try to think about how we weigh the treatment interventions and time for that versus the programming interventions. So it's not necessarily a black and white, but that is part of the ongoing discussion we're having, and it also applies to substance treatment too. Thinking about the clinical versus, let's say, the programming arm, with a focus on integrating to be more efficient, but also to ensure that we're offering individuals, again, full spectrum services.
Great. Hopefully you can create a seamless framework
That would be
and
great.
approach.
Would be wonderful.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you, sorry, we just talking. We heard from DOC that everybody who is signing up for sick call at OBCC is being seen the same day. Is that CHS's impression? And can you just speak more generally about production and capacity issues at OBCC where there is not a ton of clinic space for a lot of people?
Sure. So not to put him on the spot, but I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Castellanos, who is in charge of operations. I think he can probably answer that question in more detail.
We invite your honest thoughts, Carlos.
Thank you, Dr. Betty. So yeah, I think that everyone knows that OBCC has limitations in terms of holding space. This is one point of entry, one point of exit. So that could create some traffic, if you want to call it in different ways. So for the past few weeks, the primary focus has been on sick call and chronic follow-ups appointments. So we are working with the department to explore different locations outside that particular clinic to minimize the need to bring large groups into the clinic. So we think that the production issue right now is not so much from the staffing resource, but more around space. So we are working to accommodate for that lapse in space, if you want to call it.
Am I right that there's only space for 7 people in the pen at a time? Is that correct?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know there's regulations of how many people you could put in the holding pens according to the size of it, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many.
So I'm going to assume, despite what we heard earlier, that people are not all being seen on the same day that they put in for sick call. Is CHS keeping a list and sort of following up with those folks? And you tell us about your tracking system?
Yeah, sure. So I think you just want to be clear that that people understand that the sick call process is a patient-driven process, and patients don't have to sign up. They don't have to call the health triage line. They could simply walk into a clinic if they are escorted. So there's no requirements for sick calls. I want to put that out there. So the way that we manage production or tracking, is again, if a patient calls the health triage line and requests to be seen for a specific problem that could be determined to be a sick call need, the person goes on a call down list or appointment list. That list goes to DOC, and then we expect the person to be brought into the clinic. What we do separately from that process is that the clinical folks, the supervisors in the clinics, if a person doesn't come to the clinic for whatever reason, right? It could be at the court, it could be out on medical visits, or just simply refusing. The clinical leadership at the clinic level would then look at the patient's medical record and determine if this person needs to come back down, or we escalate the DOC to make sure that this person is brought to the clinic. So we just want to emphasize that there is no just closing out of appointments without a medical review or escalation to DOC for that production.
If there's not something identified in the chart that's an obvious red flag, you would count on the patient to then make a new request the next day if they weren't brought. Is that
the person stays on the list until the clinical teams makes a review of. They will know if the person's produced or not produced based on the medical record.
Okay. Can I ask, just to clarify, the MOs at OBCC, are all of those folks being seen for mental health needs on the units? They are. Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at Beepin, but looking, sorry. looking
Yeah,
at you.
I think so. So mental health services is on unit, but sick call and medical follow-ups is expected to happen in the main clinic. So it's just two different things.
Okay. And my last question is just about the clinic at Resch and how well that's working, the new clinic that's been opened up.
Yeah, just feedback from staff most recently is that it's doing well. I think there's, I don't want to speak for the department, but there's a lot of attention that has been given to that specific area. So heard from staff that production to the clinic has improved. But
For follow-up, just for on the record, you talked about sick calls are patient-driven, meaning an individual in custody has stated, I need to see medical in some capacity, right? Then for whatever reason, you guys track it until that person has either been seen, you get documentation that they've refused or they just weren't brought down, correct?
correct. So there's two different types of refusal. If a person comes to clinic and refuses services in front of medical providers, that goes into a medical record. If a person refuses to DOC outside the clinical setting or without a medical provider being present, that's a DOC refusal. So
Okay. I'm at the top on the production where the individual has requested on a unit, I need to see medical. How do you guys get that documentation and acknowledge that that individual has requested to be seen?
So we won't have that information. If a patient signs up on the unit or verbalize the need to come to clinic to an officer, we will know. We will make contact with the person once in the clinic and determine, what was the visit type for.
So you're dependent on DOC translating that information from the unit to medical to state, here's the list of individuals that want to be seen.
So it could go both ways. It could be the patient himself saying, I'm here for sick call, or it could be that the escort brought the person to the clinic and said, he's here for sick call.
Either way is dependent on DOC delivering that
That's
person
correct.
for
Correct.
medical.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I wanted on record for production.
Yes.
The lack of clarity for me is that how many people are signing up on a unit and it stops there. That it's not making it to medical to be tracked.
I don't have a number. I think we could, I don't want Nancy, we will have the amount of people that called the health triage line and kind of come up with a sense of how many of those would have been for sick call. Yeah.
I get that. I guess I'm trying to get clarity on when I get complaints from individuals in custody saying, I've signed up for sick, I want to be seen, but I haven't been seen or transported. So I'm trying to find out where the break happens.
Amen. Right.
Yeah, just to clarify, for sick call, we would rely on DOC to provide us with that information.
That's what I needed on the record. Thank you.
I guess sort of continuing on that, although down a slightly different path, where you have the list for sick call that's generated by patients calling in and making appointments. So the known, not picking up on the unknown, but understanding that they exist. Do you have a formal process with DOC for exchanging information about the variance between who signed up and who came and was seen? Or is it more informal that you follow up on a patient by patient basis?
Yeah, I could only speak to our own system. So we have an appointment list that we share with DOC. There is some reconciliation that happens on the ground. But again, our own record keeping is in the medical record. I'm not sure how DOC maintains the outcome of that appointment.
Did you want to add to that?
I want to move. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two separate processes, and maybe that's where it's getting a little confusing. There's the sick call process that's, individual and DOC driven, where we rely on DOC to let us know who would like to come to the clinic. And then there's the health triage line, which is separate than sick call, where individuals can contact us without going through DOC if they have a clinical need. And so that's, so that's a separate system, and that's CHS driven. and monitored.
And you don't consider when you convert a communication that comes in on that line to a list, that is separate and apart from the sick call list?
It's communicated to DOC as individuals that we need for production so that we can evaluate them. And so there'd be individuals who are not on one list and not on the other. I guess what you're getting to, there could be redundancy, but you know, they're two separate lists.
Yeah, I'm not even trying, I'm trying to understand what happens when there's a delta, where there's room to improve upon the follow-up and how
Yeah.
we could put in place systems that would improve on it.
Sure, in terms of, and again, in terms of our system, there is a monitoring of individuals who aren't, produced. There's a clinical review and then an escalation, both clinically and then within DOC for any urgent clinical matters.
I just want, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I want to make sure I totally understand. Even when an individual reaches out and you give DOC a list of these are the individuals we want to follow up who have actually requested, you're relying on DOC to communicate if that person refused or anything. You're not talking to that person to say,
Correct.
did you refuse?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think it would be better, and why don't you directly get those sick call requests so you know who wants to be seen. Right now, you have no idea who wants to be seen. You only have people who, with the sick calls who come for you, who are brought to you by DOC. There could be a dorm that doesn't come for a while. There could be various reasons there could be a lot of lockouts. I mean, there are. Don't you? The only way that you could know is if you knew, because it went to you directly, which is a very standard thing. The sick call slips go to medical and they're triaged. I mean, it's a standard thing in jail healthcare.
Sure, I think that's why, just to reiterate, there's a separate process where individuals can contact us directly and should have access to the phone line to contact us directly, so that there is a separate list where we can track and then we know who wants to see us. That is separate than sick call, which would be on the spot, an individual asking DOC to bring them to clinic. So that option for the health triage line is there, always there. So that access is there.
But you have no idea if someone puts in a sick call slip and they're not brought down that they want to be seen.
If they have not called the health triage line.
Yeah, they're using a process that you approve of, right? They're not doing something out of network. They're filling out a sick call slip and they're putting in some box, and then DOC is getting it and they're making some list and they're bringing people down. But you have no idea who is not on that list who requested it that day.
Correct, as it relates to sick call.
I think you should fix that. Anyway, thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate it. Sure.
Vice Chair. So good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome back to this location. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the BOC staff that allowed us to be here and be remote. So I thank Melissa Cintron Hernandez, Brian Gonzalez, Danielle Ortega, Tanya Glover, and Sean Vargas. They worked very hard for this to be possible and for the public to be able to join us remotely, so thank you. And so I'll start with the update on deaths since the board's last meeting. Curtis Davis, age 44, died as a result of a suspected but unconfirmed suicide in GRBC on July 23rd, 2023. Donnie Ubiera, age 33, died of a suspected but unconfirmed overdose in GRBC on August 22nd, 2023. And we express our condolences to Mr. Davis's and Mr. Ubiera's families and loved ones. The board is actively investigating these deaths and will issue a final report on our findings. Next, the board expresses condolences for deaths of department staff since our meeting in July. They are retired officer Harold Sanchez Jr., retired officer Charles Hardy, retired officer William Farrar, retired officer Stephanie Holmes, retired officer Kelly Parrish, retired officer Cecil Ray Butcher, retired Captain Joseph Faveadis, retired Captain Winston McLeod Sr., retired officer James Kenneth Lutz, retired officer Mitchell Peters, and retired officer Peter Butko. And we want to share our deepest condolences with the families of these deceased officers and captains. Regarding the census update, as of September 7th, 2023, the total census of people in custody is 6,188. Broken down by facility, as of September 7th, in OBCC, 1,189, in Bellevue, 51, EMTC, 1,212, in GRVC, 885, NIC and NIC Infirmary combined, 280, in RESH, 178, RMSC, 379, in RNDC, 1,125, in BCBC, 531, and in West Facility, 78. And I'll note here that DOC has informed BOC, as well as reported in the press, that BCBC, AKA the boat, is set to close in October, and that the remaining people in custody and non-uniform staff will be sent to various locations and facilities on Rikers Island. And we're told by DOC that, quote, the reason for this move is to centralize operations on the island to more efficiently manage people in custody and deploy staff and resources. And finally, I have an update on reporting. Regarding heat, BOC's monitoring and research staff reviewed the department's heat action plan released in late July of this year to determine whether the department was following its own heat mitigation policies and procedures, particularly on the high heat or high heat advisory days. In July, board staff visited multiple housing areas, including those designated for heat-sensitive people in custody across 5 facilities. Those visits also coincided with the city's heat advisory that month. In August, board staff monitored heat conditions in other housing areas across 6 jails. During those visits, board staff recorded exceedingly warm temperatures in some housing units, including some units that house heat-sensitive designated people in custody, and in other areas of the facilities, including the law library at one facility. Board staff worked expeditiously with DOC staff to escalate those concerns for immediate resolution. Board staff are preparing a report with their findings and recommendations and will share them with the department in the coming weeks. And that concludes BOC's update. Sorry. Regarding the fire report, BOC's investigation into the NIC fire that occurred in April, our investigation is ongoing and we continue to await reports from FDNY and DOC. And that concludes DOC's update.
To public comments of the I'm going to start with Joshua White, followed by, and please forgive me if I mispronounce. Natalie Flores, followed by Michael. Joshua White.
Good afternoon. My name is Joshua White. I am a public defender right here in Manhattan, specifically with New York County Defender Services. Privileged to represent poor people accused of crimes in this city. What I'd like to say is you could go to any criminal court in the boroughs and you wouldn't have to wait long before you see a public defender like myself arguing passionately, sometimes indignantly, to keep our clients out of Rikers Island. Now, the decision before the court is to determine whether or not impossible bail on our cash-poor New York residents is the kind or degree of restriction or control that's necessary to reasonably ensure that they come back to court. They're considering whether a 6-month, an 8-month, a 12-month sentence at Rikers is an appropriate punishment for a quality of life crime like possession of drugs or petit larceny. While simultaneously, public defenders like myself who have to look our clients in the eyes, look their families in the eyes when they are brutally attacked at Rikers, when they are sexually assaulted at Rikers, when they die in or as a result of their time in Rikers. For poor New Yorkers, time spent at Rikers at best will result in life-altering trauma, and at worst could be a death sentence. Now, I know that one of the members had asked a DOC official about what the operational challenges at Rikers are right now, and the response seemingly would have suggested that there are really no significant operational challenges. So I made a list of some operational challenges that really do need to be addressed. One, I'm constantly told by clients that they have challenges getting onto phones to make calls to us because the phones are being basically controlled by gangs. I'm told by multiple clients that they go some days with only getting 2 or 1 meals because, again, their access to food is being restricted by operational issues or gangs are controlling the way that food is distributed. I'm told that by clients that they don't have access to covers, to towels, to toilet paper at times. I'm told that fight nights are still happening. I'm told that sometimes my clients go weeks without ever stepping outside. The same dangerous or controlled substances that my clients are being incarcerated for are accessible in Rikers Island, which is, really, it shows that there isn't a significant investment in encouraging rehabilitation because the same things and the same reasons and the same excuses that lead our clients to Rikers are being aggravated by their time there. Our clients are not receiving medical treatment. I had a client reach out to me on multiple instances who has breathing issues, struggles with asthma, was sprayed with a chemical substance and was never brought to medical or received medical treatment. Now, even my clients can appreciate that correction officers at Rikers Island experience some issues and challenges, and that it can be very scary and it can be dangerous and difficult to prevent and stop violence. But there are also COs on Rikers Island who are encouraging and instigating violence. I had an issue with a client whose family paid for their bail with a credit card, and my client was not released from Rikers. My supervisor and myself had to reach out to Board of Corrections, the DOC staff, legal counsel for several days asking why someone whose family has paid bail has not been released from Rikers just this year. And we're told repeatedly, well, that there's no one at Rikers right now who has access to the system that can verify that bail has been paid. And so the credit card that was used to pay bail, the funds were returned, but the amount that was spent on that credit card wasn't instantly available. And so now another grandma, another cousin, another family friend has to use a credit card to pay the same bail amount day after day after day until that person is released from Rikers. And so there are a lot of operational issues. I know I'm over my time. I appreciate your willingness to listen.
No, and anything else, can you type it up and submit it so it will be on the record, especially in regards to the operationals around bail processing?
Absolutely.
And thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie, followed by Michael Klinger. I apologize.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo. I'm a correction specialist at one of Manhattan's public defense providers, New York County Defender Services. As a correction specialist, my role is to meet with our clients who are incarcerated and use any avenues available to me to ensure that they're being treated in accordance with their rights as detainees and also as human beings. I'd like to speak today about RESH, which in my opinion is at just about the worst that ESH has been in the 2 years that I've been doing this work, just over 2 years. The Deputy Commissioner's testimony today about RESH, I think, was very telling in what he chose to discuss, which was violence. That is the only thing he talked about at RESH. Discussing violence is very important. As we know, it's an extremely serious problem on Rikers Island. But what this man failed to mention at all was everything else that people are experiencing in RESH. Number one, food. Our clients are sometimes not receiving food for an entire 24-hour period. Not breakfast, not lunch, not dinner. And this happens when, quote, if we piss off a CO somehow, they don't feed us. Water. All of the cells in RESH have some sort of, well, I mean, I don't know what it looks like, some sort of water spigot where they can get water out of it. But the water is barely dribbling out. They don't really have access to water. When they ask a CO, hey, my water isn't working, no answer. Shelter. Our clients have no means with which to clean their cells, and they are infested with vermin and insects. One of my clients told me he woke up to a cockroach sitting right next to his pillow the other day. Another client told me he had no sheets or blankets in his cell on his bed. There's basically nothing to do but be in this cell. If you don't want to be at the restraint desks, rec is not really offered. It's offered irregularly. Maybe you're getting an hour a day. Food, water, shelter, these are the most basic things that any human needs to survive. And there is a severe lack of access to these in RESH currently. Why isn't DOC talking about that at all? They don't want you to know, and they also don't care. They don't even care to stand up here and try to lie about it. They've talked about violence, but it's not the violence that have killed these New Yorkers for the past decade, more specifically for the past few years where deaths have been rising and rising. It is the unlivable conditions and the lack of care from the department whose custody these people are in. In conclusion, until the department cares, you have to do it for them. Please keep pushing as hard as you can to expose the lies of the department's upper management and to get as much data about the realities of Rikers Island that you can. I'd like to end with one suggestion that I just thought of. When I sit here in the audience during the hearings, I have a lot of questions for the department during their testimony that are informed by my work that I wish you guys kind of knew to ask. If it's possible at all, I think it would be helpful if once the agenda is posted, you could maybe accept questions via email from the public that you could sift through and choose to maybe ask when we don't have the opportunity to. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
After Mr. Klinger speaks, Antoinette Anderson will be after him.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. And we thank you for the opportunity. I'm a little short. Is that any better? Can you hear me? Maybe. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services, and we thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today. Having now heard from the department about its reopening of OBCC, We want to share our clients' experiences there. As they first arrived at OBCC, many of our clients lost their personal property. The department often did not allow people to pack their own belongings, frequently failed to provide property receipts, and often failed to reunite people with their property. Why it matters. Our clients' property includes clothing sent by family members, items purchased through commissary, often at inflated costs, items of personal or sentimental value that are not easily replaced, and legal papers. It harms our clients when the department loses these things with no acknowledgement and no accountability. At OBCC 3 Southwest and 4 Southwest, people arrived to find flooded cells in tears and were told that the cause was a leaking fire sprinkler pipe. Plumbers eventually shut off the flow of water, but our clients have no way of confirming that the sprinklers were repaired or that they will function in the event of a fire, and they're concerned because the damage from the fire at NYC this past April was made worse, we hear, by non-functioning sprinklers awaiting repairs. In its first weeks, OBCC saw a total breakdown in visitation services. All of our clients depend on visits to keep them connected to their communities, their families, and their own humanity. Clients also reported a lack of access to showers, laundry, law library, daily recreation, religious services, and any grievance process by which they might try to address these concerns. And although the heat plan that the department issued again this summer included a promise to provide at least 2 industrial-sized fans in non-air conditioned units and cool showers when necessary, people at OBCC in units with no air conditioning reported that their showers, far from being cool, ran dangerously hot. Our clients' stories from OBCC indicate multiple failures there, including both physical plant failures and failures to meet the board's minimum standards. But the department routinely fails to meet those standards in every facility that it operates. EMTC simply does not provide outdoor recreation to many people there, a violation of the minimum standards, which require 1 hour of outdoor recreation 7 days a week. As for the heat plan, in recent days, we've heard that in intake dorm at 5 Main, there's no air conditioning and only 1 fan for the whole unit. At RNDC Mod 3 Lower South, the department allows access to recreation only once or twice a week, a violation of the minimum standards. And beyond that, the unit has been without a B officer for the past 4 days. Because there's no officer on the floor, it takes about 10 minutes for any officer to respond when there are medical emergencies. And there are medical emergencies, possibly exacerbated by the lack of air conditioning and no working fans. This week at RNDC 4B, the community was locked into their cells for longer than 24 hours, a violation of the minimum standards and possibly a violation of the State Halt Solitary Confinement Act. And just yesterday at RNDC 5 Main South, amidst this week's extreme heat, a person with a heart condition in a heat-sensitive dorm with no working air conditioning fainted, and it took the department nearly 5 hours to bring him to the clinic. Despite its own assessment, the department was evidently not prepared for the population move into OBCC, which leaves us concerned for the shift out of VCBC and what it will mean for our clients on the boat in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Internet Anderson.
Good afternoon. My name is Antoinette Anderson. I'm the correspondent secretary of the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association. As I've sat here and listened to many complaints, many different issues, one thing that bothers me the most is 2 issues. One issue I came to speak about, which is the mentally ill, an issue that we're having. And the other thing is the blame that's being placed on staff for everything. We're not to blame for everything. There's a lot of things that we're going through coming to work. One of the issues is, you talked about cell doors, staffing, programming, right? You talked about sick call. We get a list, we go and we pick up the inmates. Some of them refuse. When it comes to sick call, if they get injured, they come down. It's not a general list of everybody. We can't service everybody every day. We can't service a whole housing area every day. So whoever signs that can be permitted to come down, they come down. Some are at services, some are at court, some are doing other things. When people in custody get injured or get assaulted, they come down. Slip and falls, they come down. That's not counting on your sick call that's supposed to come down for the day. So it's different reasons as to why certain people don't get to come down. right? So when it comes to staffing issues, it's not just DOC that's having staffing issues. It's also medical having staffing issues. It's also the mental health area that's having staffing issues, correct? Now, when it comes to the mentally ill, I dealt with the mentally ill. I've been on this job 18 years. It's not easy as a correctional officer to deal with people that have mental issues. It's not, right? We are only trained to do certain things. We do not administrate medication, and a lot of the people in custody that we deal with need medication. Unfortunately, we are not mental institutions. So if you want people in custody to stop coming to Rikers Island, open up the mental institutions that are trained to deal with this population. We had an officer recently that was stabbed in the hand by a mentally ill PIC. Something has to give. We can't be to blame for everything. We cannot. We don't control the psychiatrist. We don't control whether or not they're given medication, whether or not they take it or not. If they was in a mentally ill institution, they would be administered the medication. We don't have that right. We cannot do that. So why are we the blame for everything? We have some people, as it was explained, and Mr. Cohen asked about the step up, the step down, that really don't have mental issues, but they play the game. That's a problem for the people that really have an issue not getting the services that they need. Certain things we cannot offer the mentally ill because of their capacity. They cannot interact, engage in those type of activities. So it's not that we want them walking around like zombies. No, because that's what we also have in our communities. Eventually, they're going to go home. And this is what we have to deal with. The same way when you walk to the train or you get on the bus or you go to your car and you're walking to a store and you pass somebody with mental issues, we have to deal with the same type of situation inside the facility, but we can't ignore it. So all I'm asking is that we stop getting blamed because we can only do but so much. Open up the mental institutions and put them where they belong because jail is not it.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. And followed by Diana Griffith and Tanya Balkan. I apologize if I'm messing up your names. Asaki, and then we're going to be followed by Diana Griffith and Taya Walkina.
Good afternoon. My name is Asaki Antoine. I am the third vice president of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. My apologies for not being at the last meeting, but I was watching via, I guess, WebEx, right? And I need to clear up one thing that was presented to you all, and then I will go into my testimony. So as far as the administration is concerned, it was said at the last meeting that correctional officers are not scheduled for 2 tours. Okay, that's incorrect. Correctional officers are scheduled regularly, weekly, for 2 tours. 16 hours, no meals. That's what's happening. Okay, it's happening in most of the facilities as well. So you may ask, why am I mentioning this? In order for the detainees to get their minimum standards, in order for RESH to run effectively and efficiently, in order for the detainees to receive their regular programming, you need additional correction officers. I know what I'm going to say is not popular among city council and even some of you. But the reality is, correction officers, additional officers are needed to run these programs, especially RESH. RESH are supposed to be ran with sufficient amount of staff. When you go below that, you cheat the detainee out of their services. What the department is doing right now is working with, they expect more with less. So when you hear, I think I heard someone in the audience provide a testimony saying that the inmates are not, the detainees are not being fed in RESH. I can tell you right now that is inaccurate, right? What's happening is officers are doing 4 and 5 tasks at one time. That's what's happening. Okay, so they are being fed in RESH. In the West facility in NYC, I spoke to you, Mr. Cohen, about this individual. There is an inmate that is causing havoc, and no one knows what to do with this person. Okay, this person has assaulted staff in record numbers. This person has caused fires. This person has pulled down the plumbing and created water damage, right? No one knows what to do with this individual. Mr. Cohen, you don't even know what to do with this individual.
I agree.
Right? You agree, right?
Yeah.
We have to come up with something because we're getting hurt. He's getting hurt. No one wins with this individual. No one. I'm here today to tell you all, as I speak every month, correction officers are not the enemy. We are here to provide for our families, most importantly, right? And we're here basically to provide a service. We try our best and we put our best foot forward every day. But without the basic tools and proper staffing, that is not going to happen. You cannot expect for correctional officers to work more than 16 hours a day and still come back to work as if we're robots. That is not reality. Rest is needed. When fatigue sets in, guess what? You have a lapse in judgment. You're not as quick to respond when fatigue steps in. No one wants to acknowledge that. It is an important piece of our job to have rest. So what? We can react, right? And we can keep ourselves and the detainees safe. I appreciate, Ms. Hoskins, your piece in regards to the agenda item, correctional officers, captains on the agenda. It's important. Most of us have a lot to say, but the fear is no one really listens or no one is going to listen, right? As far as the women in the jails, I would like an update concerning that. That's an important piece for us, for the detainees and for correctional officers, right? Our correctional officers are still being harassed. There's still sexual assaults going on, although there haven't been any in the last 2 months, but it's still happening. The harassment is still happening. Yes, this harassment is still happening. I'm not here to just be the bearer of bad news. I'm not. I can give accolades when it should be given, right? And I want us to all be a part of that change and don't beat down, because it seems like when we come here, there's always a beat down on correctional officers. Don't be that, because I know when each of you tour the facilities, you meet some real great men and women that's basically trying to do their jobs and provide for their families. That's all I have for you. Thank you, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you. We'll be followed by Ms. Griffith.
I just want to say thank you both, and I'm looking forward to having more time on the agenda to hear from staff who are actually walking the tours in future meetings. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Griffith, and I'm a legal advocate with the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Bronx Offenders. I'll be sharing the experiences of two of our clients. Our client, Ms. N, has bravely allowed us to share her identity and experiences today. However, out of an abundance of caution and fear of retaliation, which she has already experienced for making complaints, we won't be disclosing her identity. Ms. N is a trans woman in ESH level 1. She reports feeling in constant danger, enduring harassment and transphobic comments from staff, as well as periodic denial of access to basic services. She's been unable to participate in any programming while in ESH because she doesn't feel safe. These concerns are rooted in the inhumane use of restraint desks, which leaves her vulnerable and exposed to assaults, as well as the ongoing issue of unmanned posts. Her feelings of hopelessness and isolation have been exacerbated by an inability to access the phone for over a month. She has had only sporadic communication with her loved ones and her legal counsel during that period. The ongoing issues of non-production or late production to video conferences only compound this issue. Ms. N had a tablet that broke over 2 months ago, which she has been unable to replace despite going through all of the appropriate channels to have it replaced. Recently, a different client sustained a serious injury to his face and several lacerations to his body while in ESH level 2. The injury to his face has resulted in permanent disfiguration and ongoing pain and discomfort. Our client was made to wait for over 4 hours to receive medical attention while bleeding from his face injury, as he pleaded with the correctional officers to be taken to the clinic immediately. The captain present at the scene informed our client that he would have to wait longer because DOC didn't have a driver available to transport him to the clinic in West Facility, and they also didn't have handcuffs to restrain him. Due to the seriousness of this client's injuries, medical staff at our MAC could not treat him. He had to be taken to West Facility, where the physician informed him that the injury to his face required a total of 20 stitches. Delays in medical treatment because DOC doesn't have the ability to manage their staff to ensure that our clients can access medical services are simply unacceptable. Despite DOC's reports that staff absenteeism is an issue of the past, incidents such as the one described previously illustrate that this issue still exists, and it's deeply impacting our clients' ability to access services and remain safe in DOC's custody. Staff absenteeism also affects compliance with minimum standards, such as having access to the mandated lockout time each day. Per DOC directives, incarcerated individuals in ESH level 1 and 2 should be offered a minimum of 7 hours of lockout time each day between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. Many of our clients in ESH level 1 have shared that they do not have any lockout time during the day. The only out of cell time they get is roughly 4 hours programming shackled to a desk. Additionally, being shackled to a desk prevents our clients from meaningfully participating in programming due to the discomfort and restrained mobility. It is evident that DOC is not only incapable of keeping our clients safe, but is also unable to meet the most basic mandatory minimum standards. We need to prioritize incarceration and shutting down Rikers. Thank you.
Name, Octavia and Zakaya. Zakaya, I'm sorry. And Octavia, followed by Dr. Victoria Phillips.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Zakaya Wartino. I am a policy advocate and social worker from the Bronx Defenders. Conditions at ESH continue to deteriorate, putting the lives of our clients at serious risk, while also contributing to the routine violation of our clients' most fundamental constitutional rights. We have noticed an uptick in infractions that result in ESH placement. Most of the time, we find that these disciplinary procedures are riddled with due process violations from people currently being held in ESH without ever receiving an infraction notice to hearings taking place outside of the timeline dictated by DOC directives. For the last several weeks, we've been filing Article 78s routinely at least once a week to dispute these due process violations. The infractions that result in ESH placement have far-reaching consequences for our clients, such as increased security classifications, different housing placements, denied access to religious services and employment, plea negotiations, bail applications, and parole board review. Another consequence of ESH placement is that our clients' state and federally protected education rights are being violated. When a client is moved to ESH, they are denied access to education. We have represented multiple students enrolled in school at East River Academy who, when transferred to ESH, are no longer provided with education and special education services. We represent many young clients with disabilities who are entitled to additional legal protections when it comes to their education. Those students, when placed at ESH, are likewise denied their special education services. We represented a student who is entitled to 12-month school services. When this student was placed in ESH, his education was immediately disrupted. There are no education services available at ESH. This violates the Hanbury Agreement as well as state and federal law. It also is extremely disruptive. When a student is learning a difficult subject such as math, a 60 to 90-day absence from their schoolwork is detrimental to their progress. There is immediate learning loss, and the class has moved on by the time the student returns to classes. This practice leaves the student behind their peers without the foundation for the new work they will be expected to complete. This applies to all academic subjects. We have filed and won education and partial hearings based on these sorts of denials of access. However, the remedies we win are also not being implemented.
Good afternoon. My name is Octavia Ewart, and I'm a legal advocate with the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Bronx Defenders. The violations of our clients' most fundamental constitutional rights don't end with the denied access to education or increased infractions. Access to the law library is a constitutional right, and it's a mandatory service pursuant to the minimum standards and DOC directives. Pursuant to the ESH directive, a law library coordinator should be visiting the housing area twice a week, which in our opinion is insufficient. But be that as it may, according to our clients, they only receive these visits once a week, if at all. Presumably, DOC's response to remedy issues such as this was to provide tablets. However, this response is illusory and futile because whenever our clients attempt to access the law library services on the tablets, they're notified that the network is unavailable. Furthermore, DOC reliance on tablets in this regard neglects to acknowledge the necessity of access to paper motions, such as Article 78 and notary services. Having access to the law library is one of the only avenues that clients have available to dispute ESH placement. This means that DOC is effectively cutting off their access to engage in due process. Ms. N, who you heard about earlier, experienced this exact situation. She made several attempts to appeal her ESH placement, but correctional officers have repeatedly refused to take her Article 78, thus preventing her from serving it on necessary parties. Unfortunately, our office was not apprised of any of her efforts because DOC have constructively prevented her from being in regular communication with her legal team while in ESH. On the topic of DOC obstructing our clients' access to relief, the current legal counsel visit procedures DOC has in place for ESH are deliberately obstructive to our clients' right to access counsel. Our advocates and attorneys have had to wait over 5 hours to see a single client in ESH. In our July testimony before this board, we reported observing confusion and frustration amongst the correctional officers due to a lack of clear and effective policies for legal visits at ESH. The same chaos persists and in fact has gotten worse. Our advocates have to take a bus from RMSC and then wait multiple hours to get on another bus to be transported to ESH. The second bus is the same bus that's used to transport incarcerated people. Half of the bus contains individual cages, while the other half is a bigger cage with multiple seats. When there is more than one legal advocate going to ESH, our advocates are placed in the bigger cage where they are locked in from the outside. While this experience has been disturbing for our advocates, it has also allowed us to step into the shoes of our clients, who, unlike us, have no choice but to be subjected to these inhumane conditions. Advocates have reported finding soiled clothes, food tray crusted with food on the floor on these buses, along with an overpowering smell of urine. Additionally, our advocates have had to wait up to an hour to be transported back to RMSC from ESH while DOC staff try to locate an available bus or van. The myriad of issues in ESH are inexcusable. For almost 2 years, defender organizations and other advocates worked tirelessly to get the right to counsel in disciplinary hearings, so as to ensure that DOC could not continue to violate people's due process rights and leave them to languish in isolation for months at a time. Given the endless number of due process violations our office alone identifies on a regular basis, it's particularly egregious that DOC continues to make legal visit process as painful and obstructive as it is. This department acts with impunity when it comes to the harm and devastation it subjects our clients to, and by extension, the New York City community. Rikers Island is incapable of keeping our clients safe. Decarceration must remain paramount so that the hellhole that Rikers Island can be closed forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Victoria Phillips, followed by Leanna and Kelly Grace.
That's for y'all too. And I'm Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips. Everyone calls me Dr. V, longstanding member of the Jails Action Coalition. We formed in December 2011 because of the conditions on Rikers Island and the boat and all the other facilities. And can I just get an extra 30 seconds? Because I got to be a woman of my word. And even though Board Member Pitts is not here, I want to state on the record that I apologize because I mistaken her name in the wrong context at the last meeting that I testified at. And that was, it's a lot of DOC stuff that I keep in my head. But I was talking about the chair for the Deaf Committee, and I mistakenly mentioned Board Member Pitts as being the chair for the Deaf Committee when I meant Ramos, and I'll get to that in my statement. But the reason I wanted to highlight, and I spoke to her and I told her I was going to apologize the same way I put her name on the record, I was going to apologize on the record. And the reason I had lifted her name up was because my thoughts, I wanted to address the fact that as women and her being the chair of the Women's Committee, I had concerns. And for example, my concerns is, a badge doesn't give anyone extra oomph in society, right? A title doesn't mean much when we talk about humanity and human rights. And especially when we're talking about what goes on in Rikers Island. I did nursing, cognitive behavioral therapy. I've monitored those with serious mental illness, and I've done forms of chaplaincy over the last 2 decades. So I think that I'm just as good as anyone else to talk about the conditions and the situations on Rikers Island. And I've noticed that when Board Member Pitts sits up here, her body language, excuses us, dismisses us. And I told her this on the phone, so I'm not saying nothing behind her back. I said, I see that she dismisses us, but when the officers and the union women get up here, she leans in, she asks questions, she's all excited about it. And my concern was the fact that real life impacted people to come up here and tell you the truth even before the federal monitor or anything else. And so it cannot be that any board members dismiss anything that's being said on the record. You have to acknowledge, hear, and follow up for each of us, and each of us are worthy of respect. And I was pointing that out to her because like last year, this month, We stood on the steps of City Hall, and I was out there with mothers, Tamara Carter, whose son Brandon died and on Rikers, and Miss Poindexter, whose brother died on Rikers, and officers. They come in here and they say they want respect, but I stood outside and I told Miss Carter, please don't yell at the officers. We're about to have our own press conference right after they get off the steps, and you'll have your opportunity to speak. And then when it was our turn, the officers did not leave the step. And then they started acting like animals, screaming and cursing at the mothers and the sisters and the loved ones that I had just asked to be fair and give them their fair turn on the City Hall steps. And I say that because even officers was talking reckless and saying sexual things that could happen if people came to Rikers Island. And I stood here before this board and I pointed out an officer in the audience, and the leadership for DOC, for the Cobra, that stood here today with the same women doing the Sandman thing to me and telling me to get off the mic while I was trying to address the issue about women. And I told board member Pitts, I have to, she said, why don't you speak about what you see on the island with the officers? I do at press conferences. I've come before this board and I've told Commissioner Molina in his own office that women are being forced to go to the bathroom on the unit because they aren't being relieved from their tour and everything else. But when I come here, I only get 3 minutes, and I don't have time to talk about what officers' union reps should be coming to tell you about. I can only talk about the people who don't have a union rep. And so I just wanted to put the apology on because that was my issue of what I was raising her name for. How is she going to be the chair of the Women's Committee when she obviously has bias in some way towards people that do not have a badge or wear a uniform? And so board member Pitts, board member Ramos should have been here. And as the chair of the death committee, I'm appalled because 8 people have died. 4 people this year came from AMKC. Where's the investigation on that facility in itself? The fact that 4 people died in July and there was not even a statement released. The fact that we are in the 9th month of this year and we have yet to receive one death report concerning the people who have died in 2023 is unacceptable. And he might be a great man in person, but he cannot lead the death committee. And so I want to respond to you because in 2019, around the medical visits, on the record, Vice President Stanley Richards actually spoke to the Dr. Adams from DOC around medical calls. And she gave an example of about 300, maybe 360, it wasn't more than 400, of people on a sick call day, right? And he even asked her, so how many was seen? And it was about 14 or 16%. So I came up on the record, I said, what happened to the other 86% of people? Because I know from working behind the walls that if you're not seen on that day, you don't get to roll over to the next day. Your visit just doesn't occur. And so for DOC to stand up here and say that they weren't prepared, they weren't ready for you to ask that question is unacceptable. And that's pre-COVID. I also want to talk about the tablets. 7 years now, I've been testifying about tablets, and many of you outside of this board have been in meetings where I brought that up as part of the advisory board for DOC. Now I'm the co-chair to the young adult task force. And so being in these positions, I've definitely used my voice for the community to talk about why they're not multilingual, to talk about the access. All these things that you heard today, they're true. And it's unacceptable that 7 years later, after advocating for the money in city council, we still are dealing with these issues. BOC leadership. Now, in the community, I often have prided myself on teaching people that they could come and testify every second Tuesday of every month out of the year, except for April, August, and December. And in 2023, for some reason, this board, fully staffed, can't get it together. And I just really want to highlight that to y'all and say, what are we doing here? Because executive leadership has to lead by example. And we can't just be changing days, having chairs that can't come at the last minute, chairs that lead committees that don't even make statements about what's going on. And your leadership shows DOC leadership how they're supposed to respond. Same thing I tell advocates when they want to respond and act nasty in certain ways. We don't act like that. Why? Because we're telling them about accountability and teaching them how to act. And we can't do that if we're following their bad behavior. And so I just want to say for all of us, step up, because today, 8 years ago, I survived emergency brain surgery. And the reason I'm saying that is because a week later, I had my neuro ICU nurse calling in to the advisory board meeting just because I still wanted to be a part of it and I still had a duty. And so many times board members say, well, those who know, and act like us advocates don't know what we're talking about. And I want to challenge you all. If I, without a title, without payment or any access the way you all do, could have my neuro ICU nurse call in to still be a part of this movement, to still fight for change, I don't expect anything less from any of y'all. I expect you to do your job. And when I say, what are you doing and we need to get stuff done, that's because I too am doing the work. So get stuff done. We got work to do. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kelly Grace Price. I'm appearing as my role as an advocate with Close Rosies and not as a reporter from city and state. But I did want to briefly touch on an article that I published last month about the death of Donnie Ubera. It was witnessed, by the way, it was in GRVC Unit 13B. It was witnessed by a man named Jose Carrillo, who has been incarcerated since 2021 for something that he didn't do. Mr. Carrillo was not offered any kind of supervised release or ankle monitoring or mental health court because he had an error on his case disposition. He had a young offender adjudication back in 2006 for his first strike. He's now 33. And it was never reflected properly on his case disposition. So when the Manhattan District Attorney's ADA, I believe his name is Greenwald, he's some kid 2 years out of Vanderbilt, did the case assessment, he should have automatically known that that particular charge was a YO because he got only 1 year on a Class B felony, and the mandatory minimum, I believe, is 6 years. So that would have been an illegal sentence. The DA's offices have a duty and an ethical obligation to investigate and do proper case dispositions. I started digging down into exactly how many people have these kind of case errors. You might or may not have heard that there have been reports back and forth starting, I think Legal Action Center published something in 2007. They did a survey, criminal histories, and everyone with a criminal history in New York State, 66% of people have at least one error on their criminal history, and 33% of them have at least 2 errors or more. This issue has not been addressed, even though Legal Action Center brought this issue forward. And the latest report that came out in early August or late July that former Chief Judge Janet DeFore published, or she commissioned, was finally published in late July, early August. And they touched on this issue of errors on case dispositions. You know I'm bringing this up. The jails are overflowing with people like Jose Carrillo. He has no reason why he shouldn't have been offered a supervised release or an ankle monitoring. And that pipsqueak DA, I can say it as an advocate, he knew better. He knew that it was an illegal sentence. You don't get 1 year for a Class B felony, but the DA didn't care. And he was gunning to send Mr. Carrillo away for life. So I got the transcript from 2006. I chased down the court reporter and I gave it to the 18B attorney who provided it to the DA's office. And they're still digging in their feet. They won't give him mental health court. They won't give him drug court. They won't give him ankle monitoring because they're truculent. They know that this is an issue that their ADAs are not being trained on, or if they're being trained properly, they're not following the ethical guidelines. I know that you have a rapport with the DA's offices. I know that you've had meetings with them. I'd really like you to please concentrate on this issue because it's not just Jose Carrillo, it's hundreds, maybe thousands of people across the state, maybe tens of thousands that this issue is occurring with, and no one's doing anything about it. And when it's discovered, the DAs just stick their heads in the sand. I just want to quickly say about Mr. Carrillo, please help him get medical attention. He has 3 ulcers. He has a tennis ball size ulcer sticking out of his stomach. And if it's not operated on, it's going to burst. He keeps putting in for sick call. They're not helping him. Now they have him in this mental observation unit because he's committed a number of acts of self-harm because he's so frustrated because of his situation. I've written emails. Commissioner Molina has finally blocked me on Twitter because he won't accept my direct messages about this person anymore. But I will, if you don't mind, I'll slip you his booking and case number. He's in that unit 13B in GRVC and in desperate need of medical attention. I was going to try and get CHS to prioritize him because apparently it's Bellevue that decides who gets surgery. It's the doctors at Bellevue who are prioritizing. And I don't know how that's triage, but I'd like some help with that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I'm not the last one to testify today, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Leona? And then after Leona, we'll have Victor Herrera.
Hi, my name's Leana Dessauer. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm not directly affiliated with a nonprofit, but I'm a proponent of bail reform and decarceration as a human being and New Yorker. And I just wanted to share some observations. It's clear that this board deeply cares, and it's also clear that the senior leadership of the Department of Corrections does not seem to care about the atrocities that are happening in the New York City jails. And I really encourage any efforts to support junior staff at DOC who do care, who are human beings also struggling to be whistleblowers and to do the right thing in those conditions. While I believe that overall we should decarcerate, the reality right now is we've got a lot of people suffering with the current conditions. And as someone with a well-managed mental illness myself, I know that difficult environments can cause mental illness to spiral. We all understand that the conditions at a place like Rikers are traumatic, even if you're a very healthy individual. And if you're not mentally and physically healthy, it's going to be the exact opposite of rehabilitation. So since it seems that senior DOC staff are really refusing to acknowledge these realities, and they're in fact actively hiding the bad conditions in the jails, I think that it's the obligation of the board as much as possible to push for increased funding for trauma-informed medical and mental health care, since it's clear that that's a huge gap, and to take a very public stance. Like, as a young progressive person, you would think most of my friends would be aware of these issues. They aren't necessarily. It's not perhaps as widely known by New Yorkers that these things are happening right within our city as you would think. And I think the board has a really powerful voice to push the message that the DOC senior leadership really needs to be held to account. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Deanna. Long time. Hi, good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Victor Herrera. DOC, I've had big long-term relationship with them, 80s and 90s. And when it comes to health, real big problem. This pandemic is occurring right now with individuals dying there. It's ridiculous, outrageous. Okay, I don't recall a time when I was there that individuals were dropping like that. Okay, when I was there. Okay, what is the problem with the Corrections Health Services from the Health and Hospital Corporation in implementing a safe environment for individuals who are sick and suffering? What is the problem? Billions putting into corrections. Why is none of that money siphoned into health? Okay, now they're talking about implementing into GRVC a more better services in terms of treatment for mental health and health. Why don't they make it more looking like a hospital, okay, with different floors where the same type of services that people in the general pop in our communities get, they can get in there, okay? And they don't need to be, if they're sick, they don't need to be returned back to general pop, okay? GRBC has areas where they can actually be maintained and observed and treated, not released into general population where the chance and risk are higher. And DOC does a lot of interference, okay, when it comes to sick call. I've experienced it even years ago, okay? It'd be days that people be waiting to get the sick call. I remember a time where the sick call officer and a nurse used to go to every unit to collect the sick call list and made sure that if anyone was required to be seen, okay, for that moment, the nurse assured, not the DOC officer, the nurse assured that that individual was sent to the health department to be seen at that very moment, okay? What's going on today? Too many people are dying. We need to do something, please, okay? You know, in my mind, I'm making a comparison to Raccoon City, Resident Evil, because as far as I'm concerned, those are dead men walking as they being sent to Rikers Island. They need help, especially the mentally ill and those who are sick. The judges are standing there. They see an individual that is ill. Why send them to Rikers if you know they're dying in there? Come on. Y'all here for a reason. Try to make these changes. The human crisis going on there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Frances Gatellis, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a volunteer with Physicians for Human Rights. I'm also part of the Jails Action Coalition and the Halt Solitary campaign. Since mental health has been, when we were outside demonstrating before this meeting started, mental health was a critical issue. And again, at this meeting, mental health is a critical issue. So I'd like to just briefly remind you, and those of you who were not even there at the time, of how it came about that you are now the biggest mental health hospital in the city. And that is in the 60s and 70s, there was a movement to close down the mental health facilities, which were incredible hellholes. They were very damaging to everybody who was there. So the movement was part of an effort to improve the situation. Unfortunately, given so many of the reports that we get about what's going on in the jails here in the city, it hasn't improved much at all. So I think it's a mistake to accept the fact that so many mental health people are here in the jails. And I think we have to try to end that, to make sure when the lawsuits came about and the mental health facilities were closed down, there was a promise by the government, and I don't know if it actually became written into the law, but there was a promise that there would be community mental health centers set up. That promise was never kept. In some way, I guess what bothers me is I agree with the corrections officer, union rep, who said before that these people don't belong here. They don't belong under your auspices. And something has to be done about that. I disagree with her idea that you open up the mental health facilities again, given their history. I would certainly not argue for that, but I do argue for there to be the community facilities that were promised originally. And I guess what I'm saying is, in some ways, I need you to be part of that fight. I need you to write reports about what's going on regarding mental health and to put pressure on the authorities to do what they promised to do, not to put mentally ill people or people with serious problems. And I'm not just talking, someone before was talking about, oh yes, we send someone to a mental hospital if they're psychotic. I'm taught there are so many other severe mental health problems, and being put in jail is itself a trauma. So you're taking people who very often are suffering from PTSD or severe depression, and you're making their mental health worse. So as I say again, that I think you have a responsibility not to be conspirators in that system, not to also be responsible for just saying, I mean, I did appreciate when you were questioning the authorities from the prison, from docs, the fact that you were clearly trying to get them to improve what they're doing. But it's not enough. You have to get the city and the state, if need be, to provide the kind of care that has to be provided, and not just to say, okay, we're doing the best we can. I asked much more from you. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon, everyone, and blessings. My name is Dr. Kim Iliano, and I am the CEO and founder of the hashtag Let My People Go, Let My People Live Now campaign. Let me just briefly tell you a little bit about how I arrived at the Let My People Go Now, Let My People Live campaign. I worked with the Halt Solitary campaign for roughly about 6 years. I was instrumental in getting the Halt Solitary bill passed. And so I stand before you today very disenchanted and bewildered, because I don't know if people realize, but the incarcerated are people who were created in the image of God, just as we were created in the image of God. So to stand before you and to hear the atrocities that have taken place for years at Rikers Island, and to know that people have died, 27 or 28 to be exact, within the past year, and are still dying, is a humanitarian crisis and atrocity. And we must understand that incarcerated people, not detainees, but incarcerated people, have a right to be treated humanely. When I look at the list, and I began to transcribe it into my notebook, because ultimately the list is just too long and it's unacceptable. And we need to understand that incarcerated people are wards, the list is just too long, are wards of the state. And DLC, excuse me, Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul, have a responsibility to do what's right by God's people, my people, your people, today, not tomorrow, not place blame, not come here year after year and say we're going to get it right. Ultimately, this is why we need the borough-based jails, because the smaller jails will help for accountability and efficiency. Am I right about it, my people? Am I right about it? Because ultimately, the situation, the atrocities that are taking place at Rikers Island, they're not being handled. They can't handle it. We need to stop and stop coming here and going over what we need to do and do it today, my brothers and sisters. It's unacceptable. There's no more excuses. We can't have any more excuses. 27 or 28 people have died. And as I voiced my statement by way of social media, you, Mayor Eric Adams, Governor Hochul, have blood on your hands. God is not pleased. Playtime is over. The handwriting has been on the wall, and people have died of COVID. I like to know if I could get the list of how many people have died of COVID at Rikers Island, if that can be made public. Because when I look at the records, they say 5 people died, but I'm not really sure if that's true. So I'll stop here. But when you have people dying and you have people that are not eating, unacceptable. Please, let's make it happen now. Thank you very, very much. Amen.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who testified in public, in person. We're now going to move to online, virtual. Teresa Westerdahl.
Teresa, please raise your hand.
Thank you. Is not. Jeanette Bocanera.
Jeanette, if you're here, please raise your hand.
Charlotte Berger.
Charlotte, if you're here, please raise your hand.
Rosemary Tarola.
Rosemary, if you're here, please raise your hand.
Elaine Marr.
Elaine, please unmute yourself and you can testify.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh boy. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Marr. I am a civil rights union leader at local New York, a social worker, and a community leader. I also spent over 420 days on Rikers prior to drafting of state. To begin with, where is Commissioner Molina? He is supposed to be here. He gets paid to be here. It's his job. His absence is unacceptable. Last month, another gentleman, Mr. Donnie Ubiera, a detainee, died on Dockside Lodge. It is reported that Mr. Ubiera, died of a fentanyl overdose. We don't really know. DOC would like everyone to believe that he obtained the narcotics for anyone but staff or officers. DOC even put on a big horse and pony show on their social media the night before Mr. Ubiera's death was reported in the media, claiming that a rather large amount of contraband was discovered in a housing unit. What Commissioner Molina failed to mention is that his officers are usually the culprits when it comes to, among other things, bringing contraband. The COs are not being scanned or even wanded upon entry. This is common knowledge. And since they are trafficking in so much fentanyl and eventually and possibly xylazine, it stands to reason that the detainees must be provided not only Narcan, but fentanyl and xylazine test strips without question or retaliation. And why are once closed buildings on Rikers being reopened? The City Council voted to close Rikers. Once a building is empty or not in use, DOC no longer owns it. Its ownership legally transfers back to New York City and can legally never be used as a jail or prison or detention center again. DOC is moving backwards, and in doing so is in violation of law, so they need to be held accountable. Detainees are not getting programs. Visiting constitutionally mandated law library, religious services, and rec services. But they are being tossed into solitary confinement, which has been illegal in New York for almost 4 years. And why in God's green earth are they still shackling detainees to chairs? Are the CEOs rehearsing for some secret production of the Crucible? I didn't think so. Nothing is improving. DOC continues to spiral. Enough is enough. They are incapable of even changing a light bulb, much less an unnecessarily mammoth Department of Corrections. If you are curious about the reported uptick in detainee on officer staff violence, if this is true, and it probably is not, if it is, I'm sure said violence has been choreographed by the officers. People, human beings, are dying at a record rate. It is beyond uncalled for. It is immoral and abusive. It is murder. Take DOC away from DOC. The show is over and they failed. Decarcerate, implement real programming and services, and shut the island and the boat down yesterday. Since that is what New York City law mandates. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Lutz.
Mary, you can unmute yourself. Mary, you can unmute yourself and start your testimony.
Is this okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You're able to hear me now? Okay, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to relate my personal experience on Rikers. I was conducting HIV risk factor research, and I worked within the Rikers Island system and health services for 1.5 years. I had my own parking space, a desk, and freedom to go into any jail, privileges that were unusual because I was not a healthcare provider. One afternoon outside our plexiglass wall dividing our officers from the general hallway, a line of inmates with their backs to us was assembled with a 1-to-1 lineup of correction officers standing at attention. A command was given and one officer grabbed an inmate from behind while another, whose tag read Pasquale, I could see this because he was directly in front of me, began pummeling the inmate till blood flowed. It seemed to me that this show of violence was to intimidate all of us behind the plexiglass, the shocked nurses, administrators, researchers, and the medical director. I turned to the medical director standing just behind me and gasped, "Did you see that?" His deliberate response was, "No, and neither did you." After I reported the incident to the Inspector General, my colleagues warned me to always check my tires before leaving and to stand away from any carts with large objects that might fall on me. My question to you as board members is this: what, if anything, has changed in Rikers culture under your watch? And I thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Vila.
Veronica, you can unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
I'm just looking at the timer, so it's 1:42, so I'm assuming that's going to get reset. Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I am with the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project. PRP monitors physical conditions in the jails, and until its closing, OBCC had some of the worst conditions. We were glad to hear of its closing. But now it is open, and contrary to DOC's presentation, we have heard enough from people in custody to know that the reopening process was rushed and sloppy. We have heard of flooding, malfunctioning sprinklers, scalding hot showers, brown water, and vermin. I am particularly concerned about reports of unbearable heat and problems accessing medical care. First, it has been very hot this week. People forced to remain indoors when it is 90 degrees risk heat exhaustion and heat stroke. But when they are held behind cement walls with windows that do not open and cells they cannot leave, that risk increases exponentially. Before it closed, DOC repeatedly told us that it was simply not possible to install air conditioning at OBCC. Inexplicably, we are now being told that air conditioning has been added to some areas. But whether they were lying then or they are lying now, health risks remain high for anyone in the many remaining areas that do not have air conditioning. The addition of AC to OBCC raises other questions. Why are we reopening facilities that require such extensive renovation? Why are we expanding capacity, increasing beds, when we should be doing the opposite, keeping crumbling facilities closed and reducing the population? Second, medical access. It is incredibly misleading for DOC to represent that all or even most people requesting medical care are receiving it the same day. PRP is hearing the same complaints that BOC has heard of people not getting access to care. 2 years ago, PRP brought legal action about the widespread problem of accessing medical care in the jails. We relied on reports from people in custody as well as data that DOC publishes on its website. And though it does not include OBCC since it was closed, DOC's own data reflects many thousands of people in custody are still unable to access medical care every month. When we filed in October 2021, the total non-production number was around 7,000 a month. Despite the department's frequent claims to have solved access problems, total non-productions this May and June was over 11,000 appointments each month. In May, over 200 of these were attributed to maximum safe capacity, meaning not enough wait space in the clinics. Incredibly, DOC takes no responsibility for non-productions due to limited waiting space in the clinics, as if it is completely out of their hands. This problem clearly still exists. Staffing issues persist. Time and again, we hear of individuals who have died in the jails, having a long history of missed medical appointments, and that their distress prior to their death went undetected or unresponded to. It is simply unacceptable for DOC representatives to claim ambush at a BOC meeting when asked to provide information on access to medical care. This is an utterly essential problem, and we all deserve urgency and accountability from DOC to address it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle Garrard.
Danielle, please raise your hand.
That ends our online testimony at this time. Before we move to the next agenda item, I would like to make a motion. One of the thoughts around when we set our agenda and actually ensuring that we are capturing the voices of family members, staff, and individuals in custody around the inability to meet minimum standards. I say that once our agenda is posted, we allow 48 to 72 hours for the public to pose questions that the staff can sort that we can include in our questions to DOC.
Very good.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you. Our next order of business is to go into executive session. Will a board member move into executive session to discuss litigation and a personnel matter?
So moved. Second.
All.
Aye.
Thank you. We are now moving into executive session.
Thank you, everybody.
Felipe. Don't leave.
It's really, really nice to meet you.
All right. All right, we're calling the meeting back to order. During executive session, we discussed litigation and we ratified prior issues of the board around litigation. We also discussed our ongoing litigation issues. In the matter of personnel issues, we voted unanimously as a board to appoint Jasmine Georges Yaila as the permanent ED of the New York Board of Corrections, effective as of September 8th, 2023. This motion.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
I'm honored and very deeply. Are more than confident in your abilities to keep us moving and progressing with the issues surrounding the Board of Corrections. All right, at this time, we're closing the meeting. Motion to adjourn. Unanimous, all in favor? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.